King Kong in the trunk. King Kong.
I'm back. Road Rants with another horror podcast. This is horror podcast number 3. And as you know, we are starting out by doing a franchise count of the Friday the 13th films. And yes, this is one of my rescues that has decided to hijack the camera. As we know, this is a more informal video podcast. That's why he is not out of the way, because... Come on, fat boy. Okay. All right. That is why I had not moved him. And I'm fine with that. All right. We're ranking the Friday the 13th franchise. Number 12 was A New Beginning, Friday the 13th, Part 5. Number 11 was Jason X. Number 10, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, as you guys know, I ran a horror website for years, over a decade ago. And you learn a lot of tidbits over the years about these movies. And it's sort of known in the horror community as Jason Takes the Love Boat. Because the movie that was supposed to primarily be about Jason in New York turned into a movie about Jason on a boat for over 2/3 of the movie. Yeah. I have one of the best posters in the history of film up on the screen right here. This movie, I will give it some credit. It had some great marketing. There was a trailer that was where they were singing New York, New York in the trailer. That poster is fantastic. I love New York. I got to tell you, after seeing that poster again after all these years, I may have to order it and put it on the wall up here, so it's in my videos. It is a great poster. Good God. Very cool shot from the movie down below where Jason walks under a billboard for the Eastern Hockey League. And there is a hockey mask that's very similar to Jason's right above his head. This movie is not without some cool moments. You know, once you get past A New Beginning, which was a total dumpster fire, there was a notable step up for me. And now, number 11, number 10, number 9, all became very close to being interchangeable. Very, very close. But ultimately, when I sat down, really got to thinking, I felt for sure the next movie ahead of this one was going to be in this spot. And it ultimately wasn't. Okay? And this movie was directed by a guy by the name of Rob Hedden, if I remember correctly. And he was sort of new. I think this was the first feature film that he actually did. And there were a lot of different scenarios for this. As we know, the movie before this one, A New Blood, was sort of a take where Jason takes on a female that has powers. Now, we'll get to that movie eventually. Powers, telekinesis. And Laura Park Lincoln was the actress that played the blonde in that movie. Well, oddly enough, John Carl Buechler, who was a very well-known makeup artist, worked on Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Part 3, directed A New Blood, had also wrote a treatment for Part 8. And actually, it sounded pretty good. And what I like about these podcasts is the fact that I can go off on these ancillary things that have to do with the movie that may have not even made it into the movie. He wrote a treatment where Tina was the name of her character. She actually goes into an insane asylum, and then many years later she gets out and she faces off with Jason again. That was originally part 8, or one of the suggestion screenplays turned in for part 8. Now, there were a couple of other scenarios. The actor that also survived part 7, he wrote a screenplay for part 8. And the scenario was going to be he was actually ended up being the killer in part 7, not Jason Voorhees. As we all know, that would have went over like a wet fart in church with me, because that is why A New Beginning is in last place. I want Jason Voorhees in these movies. So I'm glad that film did not get made. Now, this movie was made on roughly like $4 or $5 million. It grossed somewhere in the neighborhood of about 14 or 15 million. So it was another profitable Friday the 13th movie. But what happened, you might be like, well, Jason Takes Manhattan, I'm sure most people have seen it by now. Like I said, it's referred to as Jason Takes the Love Boat. And the biggest reason why so much of this movie ended up being on that boat and not actually in New York was budget. It was going to cost too much money once they got there, got to where they wanted to film it. They realized, whoa, this is going to cost way too much money. Because there were scenarios where Jason was originally supposed to invade the Broadway and cause havoc. He was supposed to invade the Statue of Liberty and cause havoc. And Madison Square Garden was supposed to be involved in this movie. All pretty cool scenarios, cost prohibited. They had to roll back. They had to get the director and say, look, you don't have the money to do this. And that's why it became Jason Takes the Love Boat. And they did end up making it to Manhattan. And there are some cool moments. There are some cool moments in the film. Kane Hodder reprises his role as Jason Voorhees. This was the second time he would portray Jason. He made his debut in part 7. And the movie kind of starts out a few years after part 7. It starts out at Crystal Lake. A boat anchor drags across Jason's corpse at the bottom of Crystal Lake. I didn't know Crystal Lake was a channel that leads out, okay? Leads out to a river that leads out to the ocean. We didn't know that until this movie. And anchor comes across, pulls Jason's body into an electrical cable, a la part 6. He's woke back up. Oh, crap. And as you can imagine, it's just a little 2-person boat. He climbs on the boat. He slaughters both people on there. This stars a lady by the name of Jensen Daggett. And I have seen Jensen in other movies. She played Rennie. Most notably, she was in Major League 3, Back to the Minors, as Scott Bakula's girlfriend. One of my guilty pleasures is Major League 3 because I'm a big Scott Bakula fan. And so I enjoy that movie, actually. Interesting enough, just some side notes. Lisa Wilcox of Nightmare on Elm Street fame was offered the role of Rennie, and she turned it down. Jensen Daggett beat out the following 2 actresses for this: Elizabeth Berkley, Saved by the Bell, anybody, Showgirls, anybody, and one Pamela Anderson. Pretty wild. So I thought that was pretty cool. When I got to researching this for this podcast and I found that, I thought that's pretty cool. Well, anyway, The boat that Jason is aboard comes out of the channel, out of the river, into the ocean, and there is a cruise ship that is getting ready to board with graduating high schoolers. This is their senior trip. They've already graduated, and they're heading to New York. And Jason says, well, you know what? I'm going to catch a ride on this boat. So he boards the boat. And there's probably 10 or so teens, maybe, and a couple of teachers, like a principal, a teacher, and then a couple of 3 crew members on the boat. And in, as expected, Jason fashion, Jason starts slaughtering them all one by one, right? And what we find out is that I believe it's the principal. He is the uncle of Rennie, who's our main character. And there's an interesting flashback scene in this movie where Rennie is out with her uncle at Crystal Lake. And he's trying to teach her how to swim. Well, what he does is he literally pushes her off the boat into the water. And as she is trying to come up for air and learn how to swim, you know, you're dog paddling, you're trying to get it going. A young child, Jason Voorhees, pulls her under the water. He's got a deformed face. One thing that really hurt this movie was the special effects, the kills, the gruesome kills, the gruesome special effects that we have come to know and love were poor, in my opinion. Okay? I thought Jason's look when his face is revealed at the end, I thought it was maybe the worst look in the history of Jason's. Maybe honorable mention to Jason X, where we kind of see Jason's face, but not really. I didn't like the look of Jason at all. Now, a weird side note, the little kid under the water trying to pull Rennie down would go on and grow up into a stuntman named Ken Kersinger. And he played in Wrong Turn as one of the hillbillies. But he would go on to play Jason Voorhees in Freddy vs. Jason. Notably and ironically, replacing Kane Hodder. And we'll get into that movie when we get to it. Okay. Freddy vs. Jason. But I thought that was crazy. That one of the odd things you find out, being fans of these movies, are all the little tie-ins, and the little kid ends up growing up into a stuntman. He becomes that little actor becomes a stuntman and plays Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. That's wild. That's one thing I like about this video podcast format, is that I can get off on these side notes and these little tangents, and people that don't know these things about these movies can learn it. You know, and internet is how I learn this stuff. Documentaries about these movies is how I learned this stuff. And in some rare cases, when I got to talk to somebody involved with some of these movies. Now, this is one of the movies I've never talked to anybody about that was involved in any way. I'm sure there's probably people I could have reached out to. I just never had a reason to. One of these days, I hope to get Kane Hodder on this channel. But this channel is going to need another probably 30,000 subscribers before I can even begin to reach out to somebody like Kane, I would guess. Now, Tom Matthews, I'm going to reach out to him pretty soon. Pretty soon. When I get up around 5,000 subs, I'm going to reach out to Tom, see if I can have him on the channel for an interview. And, you know, Jason Lives, Never Hike Alone. So anyway, they all get off the boat after one person is killed, one after another. Like I said, nothing fancy, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing great. What I will say is there's some pretty decent acting in this one. Okay, the acting is pretty good. Some of the ancillary characters aren't great, but Jensen Daggett is so good in this as the lead heroine that I gotta give it some real credit. Plus, you have the mannerisms and the movements and the portrayal of Jason from Kane Hodder. Okay, so that helps the movie. You finally get to New York, and you still end up in some alleyways. Jason kills some drug users and some people that's trying to rape Rennie. And there is a boxer, a kid that was a boxer for the high school. He makes it to New York. Now, maybe the coolest kill, actually the coolest kill in the whole movie, is pretty cool. He ends up on top of a roof with Jason. And he starts boxing Jason. I mean, he's throwing jabs and he's throwing right hooks. And he's like this, I don't know, some hot shot high school boxer, I guess. Some champion. And he has knocked Jason back. And he's got Jason right on the edge of the building, ready to fall off. But he's exhausted. And he stops, and he's huffing, and he's puffing, and Jason's kind of looking at him. You know, typical Kane Hodder looking at him like, mm-mm. Other than the fact that Jason is taking steps back, Jason really shows no damage on this, okay? So, he stops like a dumb shit and says, because he could have landed 2 more shots, Jason had been off the side. And then he'd have had a chance to get away. And, of course, movie magic. But, you know, he stops and he decides he's going to be charitable, and he says, okay, mother bleeper, take your best shot. And I knew, even the first time I ever saw this, which, by the way, I saw this in the theater opening night, 1989. I was young. I was pretty young. Probably too young to have actually gone in and seen this, but hey, it was what it was. Actually, I guess I would have been, I'd have been old enough. 13 probably. So he tells Jason, take your best shot. And Jason knocks his head completely off his body. And it goes rolling off. And that is the only, in my opinion, the only notable kill in this entire movie. You know, I mean, and that's tough because so many kills were really good in the final chapter, part 2. There's some pretty good kills in the remake, and there's a couple of good kills in Freddy vs. Jason. There's great kills in Jason Lives. There's some fairly decent kills in A New Blood. Okay, but this one was devoid. It was like, let's make this one less makeup intensive as the previous ones. And let's not make... Now, it should be noted, the Motion Picture Association was really... I can remember this. They were really coming down on these films as far as gore. And they would submit, if I remember correctly, Part 6, Part 7, Part 8... and maybe even Jason Lives, or not Jason Lives, Jason Goes to Hell, were submitted, and the first 3, Part 6, Part 7, Part 8, actually got sent back to the producers and the director with an X rating. This was before the invention of unrated cuts and NC-17. I don't know if anybody remembers NC-17. Now, Jason Goes to Hell, I believe, was sent back with an NC-17 rating. So then it had to be chopped down even more. Now, Jason Goes to Hell has an unrated cut out there, and it is better than the theatrical release. It is. So, and which is interesting when I go to do my future ranks and that movie's involved, because I own that unrated cut, and yeah, it's better. Some of the kills are better for sure. Versus the versus the theatrical cut. So look, they get all the way down. They have chased Jensen and this guy that sort of her pseudo boyfriend, this guy that likes her, who I don't know his name right off the top of my head. Oh, Scott Reeves, I think. God, I do know. Jesus, guys. Okay, Scott Reeves is a famous, now relatively famous, or he's famous among housewives because he stars on General Hospital or Guiding Light or one of those soap operas. Was on there for like 20 years. that the small things you know from these movies, right? So they make it to the end. They're in the sewer. A worker comes through and tells them both Jason's hot on their trails. And he tells both of them, you better get out of here because at midnight, we flood the sewer with toxic waste in order to clean it out. Very odd, right? I mean, very odd. Okay? By the way, the sewers of New York, if you watch that, it's like, wow, these are really clean concrete tunnels you got here. Okay? Very, very, I mean, like orderly. I was like, wow, these are the cleanest sewers I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, they finally catch up. They're trying to get up to a manhole, and Jason's after him. He's literally got a hold of him. And then all of a sudden you hear what sounds like liquid or water. It shows him. He turns and looks, and you can see the flood coming towards Jason. And in a weird, sort of strange moment, all of a sudden he starts talking. Jason's talking, but he's talking like an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. And he starts saying, Mommy, Mommy, please don't let me drown. Kind of sad. Kind of sad. His mask pops off. Awful incarnation, makeup-wise, of Jason. I mean, I'm like, that's not one of the best ones, okay? And the toxic waste gets rid of Jason. He's gone. Point of fact, he's dead. Come to think of it, right? So I was talking about ones where he actually looked like he died or was going to die. I guess technically speaking, Jason did die in this. And at the end, all you see is a crumbled up, sort of really messed up looking hockey mask. And there is a pretty cool scene when they get out of there. They get back up on the sidewalk, and you see this first person view of something coming. And you're like, oh shit, he ain't dead. And it's her dog, Toby. She has a dog that's with her through most of the movie. Very cute little dog. Named Toby. And Toby comes back. So it's a good moment. That's where the movie ends. Now, I said number 11, number 10, number 9 were all very close. And I gave Jason X a 4 out of 10. I give Jason Takes Manhattan a 4.5 out of 10. Okay? Is it entertaining? Have I seen it a slew of times? Yes. I've seen this movie, I would guess 30 times probably. Maybe more. Maybe 50 times for all I know. As much as I love these Friday movies. Because every year, usually on Friday the 13th, every year I have a marathon. Just like I marathon the entire Star Wars catalog, I marathon the Friday the 13th catalog. At least usually on Friday the 13th is when I do it. I literally have people that'll send me text and they're like, you getting ready for your Friday marathon? I'm like, yeah, it's coming. I'm going to do it. And, sometimes I only get through 4 or 5 of them because of time or something like that. So I just have gotten where I watch my favorite ones, generally speaking. But, look, there was nothing overwhelmingly good about this movie. But there was nothing overwhelmingly bad. The premise of Jason in New York sounds awesome. It sounds great. In fact, if they were to make this movie now, considering that now they'd probably be willing to actually spring for the budget, or at least the budget to build the sets, I would assume they would probably be willing to spend, $20 million on a Friday the 13th movie. Because it is my theory, and on a side note, we can talk about this. It is my theory that, like the remake when it came out in 2009, look, that theater was packed. And it ended up grossing nearly $100 million worldwide. Well, I think Halloween just proved a new Friday the 13th movie is probably going to make $150 million worldwide, $200 million worldwide. It's going to be a massive hit when Jason finally comes back. So now you can have little budgets that are increasing and look at getting better actors involved and things like that for Friday movies, like they did with the remake with Jared Padalecki. I always get his name wrong, from Supernatural. He should have been Tommy Jarvis. And Danielle Panabaker from The Flash, right? And we'll get to that movie. That's probably going to be my most controversial ranking of the bunch, I would think. I guarantee you. So, 4.5 out of 10 is what Jason takes. It's very just not bad, not terrible, not good. It's okay. It's okay. It's entertaining, but it's nothing to write home about at all. I mean, again, we're going to have small leaps here. A New Beginning was god-awful, horseshit, terrible, dog crap. And then you had a considerable step up to Jason X. And Jason X, this one, and my next one, all are in that same range. And then we're going to have another step up in quality, okay, as we get further up the list, Look, there's several of these movies I consider to be flat good. Several. So the ratings will go up significantly as we go, right? So that's number 10. Jason Takes Manhattan. Or as the budget constraints limited it, Jason Takes the Love Boat. Tell me what you think, Rhodes Squadron. Where do you have this one on your rank? And that's a badass poster. I need to get that for the channel. I really do. Good God, I forgot how great that poster was. Peace, I'm out. Subscribe if you're new. Till next time.
King Kong in the trunk. King Kong, King Kong, King Kong.